Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you so much for joining me as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for the worlds that Obsidian has created for us. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric aka Gingerino. Thanks everyone for joining me as we dive into history, lore, and game mechanics for Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 and Avowed. For anyone wondering why we pair those games together, it's because they share the same fantasy setting known as Eora. And so whether you start off in Avowed and you're curious more about the world in Pillars of Eternity, or if you've been playing Pillars of Eternity and you've never really jumped into a game like Avowed, this is a podcast where we can all get together and explore the lore of the world that these games are set in, just appreciate what Obsidian has written for us, and geek out about a thing that we know and love. If you're new to the podcast, first of all, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have anyone here who's listening and who can appreciate this world for what it is and just join in the conversation. If you are new, I'm going to signpost you towards episode 0 if you want to be signposted further to episodes that are foundational to this world's lore, such as how magic works, what the races are, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean you can't start here. Although, as a heads up, today's episode will feature spoilers from Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, as well as a bit about the character of Ludwine from Avowed. So if you do not want to have some stuff about the character of Ludwine, one of the main antagonists anyway from Avowed, have her story spoiled for you, then consider jumping off the episode. Or if you don't want to have some of the later portions of the critical path of the second Pillars game, which is Deadfire, then consider jumping off the episode. I will give heads up when any spoilers does arise, but it's kind of going to be sprinkled throughout today's episode. So if you're concerned about either of those, then maybe consider listening to some of the foundational episodes if you haven't already, or catching up on an episode that you might have missed. What we're going to be discussing today is, it's a mixture of things. We're going to be talking about this ship that you can find in the second Pillars of Eternity game called the Fonferrus, as well as some characters that are associated with this ship, also known as the floating Hangman, and a special sword that is at the center of the story for all of these characters. And it does tie in a little bit to Ludwine from Avowed, albeit in a tangible way, but I still think it's worth mentioning. No news to go over regarding Avowed or anything like that. I did see a post this morning about Avowed increasing in price in the UK. I didn't follow up on that to see if it's led anywhere or if it was just a rumor, but not sure what's going on there. As far as Obsidian-related news is concerned, at the time of this recording, we were less than a week away from the official launch of The Outer Worlds 2. For those who have paid for it early with pre-order access, you might actually be able to play it today or tomorrow, one of those 2 days. And yeah, it looks to be a great game. I'm personally really excited for The Outer Worlds 2. They just released a song called Fibonacci, which me as a huge math nerd, I studied math in post-secondary, I love the song and everything that it does, and the creepy artwork with the hands on the YouTube video, it really sold it for me. Like, if I hadn't already decided to pay for the game, then that song alone would have immediately caused me to purchase the game. I love that song. So check out Fibonacci on Obsidian's official YouTube. I think it's a great song as a math nerd anyways, but whatever. So I'll be playing The Outer Worlds 2, hopefully, if I can peel myself away from my tabletop role-playing game books. I've been working hard at designing adventures for my table. I'm also trying to come up with a conversion for how to run Eora in different gaming systems that have kind of their own default setting. And like anybody who jumps into the OSR scene, I'm also kind of plinking away at my own system and game setting, which I guess is kind of a joke within the community that eventually everyone does, but regardless, that has nothing to do with this podcast or what we're talking about, so let's just jump into today's lore.
Half the locals would arrest you for trespassing and the rest would kill you outright. I'm curious, what exactly did you find there?
So pretty much all of the lore we're going to be talking about today comes off of pillarsofeternity.fandom.com. I mean, obviously it comes from the game itself, but I'm going to be reading most of this lore off of that website. To start us off, I'm going to tell you a quick story about this galleon ghost ship from Pillars of Eternity 2 called Fonferrus, which means iron strength in the Vailian language, Vailian being one of the worldwide superpowers at the time of Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, as well as Avowed. Also known as the Floating Hangman, this ship is, as I'm reading off the site here, a frightful legend amongst sailors in the Deadfire. Many sailors fear the Hangman and flee at the first sight of thick fog, an omen of its arrival. It's rumored to have a crew of undead, captained by a visage of death itself, and the ability to magically clear even the roughest storms. The Hangman is the resurrected remains of the Grand Vailian Galleon, the Fonferrus, meaning iron strength, a ship that Darkosi paladin Lucia Riven used to flee the burning palace when charged to protect the royal family's sword, the Ongoliero do Espires. After being tracked down by Isir the Barithian, Riven was slain during the ensuing fight at the Battle of the Duskin Isle. Himself being mortally wounded in the battle, Isir retreated to Nekataka and begged Bareth for another chance to serve his cause of protecting the sword even in death, thus becoming a death guard. Out of sheer will and faith, Riven too rose from the dead, spawning a crew of undead to aid her, and she now roams the sea in the tattered ship, attacking unknown vessels in hopes of one day coming across Isir and reclaiming the sword. So there's a lot there that we can actually cover. So this is a story about the Fonferrus, otherwise known as the Floating Hangman. It is a ship made or crewed by the undead, and it's kind of a tattered-looking ship. It looks like it shouldn't be able to float, that kind of thing. And we've seen this kind of thing before. It's very Pirates of the Caribbean, with the Black Pearl and all that, or something along the lines of even Captain Jones's ship, along those lines. So it's something that we've seen in media before, but it's still really cool to play in a video game. And there's this entire story going on behind not just the Fonferrus, but the people that are aboard the ship and its captain, Lucia Riven, and their goal to find this sword that another undead person has on one of the islands within the Deadfire archipelago. And it harkens back to the age-old Darkosi Paladini and the Grand Valia culture that they originally came from. So to put it in a little bit of context, the Grand Vailian Society, or now referred to as Old Valia, it was once one of the most powerful cultures within the world. They had massive wealth, they had an extended reach across the globe, lots of influence, but their society and civilization collapsed. There's a lot of discussion as to what caused the collapse, but that's not the purview of what we're talking about in today's episode. But roughly 2,000 or so years ago, the Grand Vailian Society collapsed. Now, in the Grand Vailian Society were this paladin order known as the Darkosi Paladini. They were founded as guards of the Darkosi Palace in Grand Valia. And since the shattering of that society, they have transformed into protectors and ambassadors of the immense Darkosi family, as well as Old Vailian culture in general. And in fact, they're one of the paladin orders that we can see an oath for in-game. If you are to play as a Darkosi Paladini, you would have technically sworn an oath that is spoken in Vailian, and I'm not going to butcher that fantasy language here, but it's translated roughly into, I swear to guard the Darkosi Palace and its rightful rulers, the scions of Aurelia Darkosi. I swear to them my love and my life, or may Magran's fires consume me. Which is, essentially an oath saying that you're going to guard and work for and be loyal to the Darkosi Palace and the people of Aurelia Darkosi, which I'm assuming was the main figurehead of the entire family. A lot of the Grand Vailian Society was centered around these noble families, Darkosi probably being one of them, probably the most prominent, who had their own palace. And then the closing segment of that oath where I swear to them my love and my life. So not just your life, but your love, right? Like you have adoration and joy towards them. So this is a paladin order that you wouldn't just join out of duty. There would also be an intrinsic sense of pride and joy to be a part of this paladin order as well. And if you failed to fulfill your oath or uphold it, then you say here, or may Magran's fires consume me. Magran being the goddess of fire and war. So literally just being consumed by flames from a divine being. And Lucia Riven is one such of those paladins, the Darkosi Paladini. And it says here in the story for the Fonferrus and this special sword, the Ongalerio, that as the palace of the Darkosi family was burning, this person, Lucia Riven, fled, charged to protect the royal family's sword. However, there was a Berethian named Isir that was tracking them. Now, a Berethian is someone who is dedicated to the goddess Berith, the goddess of the undead and portals and doors, etc., etc. And so this person is dedicated to that god and begged them for a chance to continue their service in protecting this sword. Now, we're not really privy here in this part of the story as to why Isir was particularly following him for this sword, although you can talk to them in the game and actually learn a little bit more, and this is part of the critical path of the Deadfire game, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Either way, Ysir the Berethian tracked down Lucia Riven on the floating hangman, or what would have been the floating hangman, and slain them during a fight at something called Battle of Duskin Isle. However, Ysir was mortally wounded themselves. They retreated to the city of Nekataka, or where Nekataka is currently founded in the Deadfire Archipelago, and begged their god Berith for another chance to serve the cause of protecting the sword. I'm not sure what this sword is so special for that this one person was charged with protecting it from the entire Darkosi family. Like, wouldn't there be people you want to protect? Wouldn't there be other things you want to protect? I don't know. What about this sword is so special? I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a pretty great sword to have in the game. It's technically an S stock. It has really great damage because it's legendary status. It can cast Ghost Blades whenever you kill an enemy. It also grants Soul Devourer, which gives you a whole bunch of stuff. So it's a really great sword. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, like, these people are literally dying to protect this sword. And not only that, but Ysir begs their god Berith to remain alive even though they've been mortally wounded, and they become a death guard. And out of sheer will and faith, Lucia Riven also too becomes a death guard, and remains upon their ship that sails across the seas, trying to find this sword and Ysir, the person who has claimed it from them. So you have these two people who, possibly from thousands of years ago, I'm presuming that the burning of the palace was also coinciding with the fall of the Grand Valian civilization, so it could have been 2,000 years ago that this all even started in the first place. And you have these two people who were so devoted to protecting and having this sword that they turned into death guards. Now, if you're not familiar with the world, a death guard might sound like a weird thing to you, and essentially it is when... Here's what normally happens when you die in this world. When you die, your body is done for. But the soul that is inside your body is still, for lack of a better word, alive. And so it decouples from your body and it moves on into the beyond, which is, just the afterlife is a short way of putting it. And after a while, that soul will return back to the physical world and enter into a new body, thus completing one cycle of the wheel, which is the name for the cycle of reincarnation that exists within this world. However, there are instances where a person can so forcibly with their will or through the help of a divine hand keep their soul and body tethered to this world where basically they both refuse to go through with dying, and you can end up being what is a death guard. Now, as a death guard, you are technically dead, but you are not, you're not fully dead, I guess is a way of putting it. Your soul is basically animating your undead body, and it actually even maintains some level of its own consciousness, unlike other undead, where the body decomposes and the soul kind of rots along with it. As a death guard, you maintain a level of consciousness. However, you're also, generally speaking, completely and utterly devoted to one particular thing, like whether it's an idea or whether it's a sword or a person or just some unfinished business. There's something that you feel that you are drawn to do. It could be a mission, it could be a campaign, it could be anything, right? So there could be a lot of stuff that you would be a death guard over that you basically stay in the world for until you can complete it, or if it's something that never ends, you just continue on that mission and quest with a level of devotion and zeal that would not match a normal living person, because it's essentially your entire soul, your entire person is now just consumed with this one thing that they are staying alive to essentially do. And in the case of Aesir the Bereithian and Lucia Riven, the Darkosi Paladin, it is reclaiming this sword and protecting it for, again, whatever reason. Now, this is part of the critical path in Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. You eventually learn that there is potentially the lost city of Ukaizo inside of Andra's Mortar. It's no big deal, of course. It's just an ancient, lost, secret city, the mythical island of Ukaizo, kind of like this world's version of Atlantis, except not below the sea, presumably. No big deal. You might have located the fact that it's inside this giant storm known as Andra's Mortar, a set of oceanic storms that no one has ever been able to go into and survive. So, no big deal. Now, of course, it obviously is quite a big deal, and it's a main part of what's going on in the game. But in order to get to Ukaizo, this mythical island that is the stage for the ending segments of the game, you first have to get there. But you have these oceanic storms that no one's ever been able to cross. Well, there are a few things that you can do. You go to each one of the different factions that exist within this world, you ask them for help, they have some ideas, and if you go to the pirate faction of the Principi Sen Petrena, which interestingly enough is actually kind of a leftover group of pirate confederations that have banded together in the Deadfire, and they are the leftovers of the Valian Society, the one that collapsed 2,000 years ago. And so a lot of the remnants and ancestors of these noble family houses have sailed into the Deadfire Archipelago and other regions of the world, but primarily in this one, to form a pirate confederation. And it's very much Pirates of the Caribbean in a lot of different ways, obviously with Obsidian's own unique flair about it, but you can definitely see some similarities if you've watched those movies and seen the way they have, their government almost structured and the pirate code, etc., etc. But they have, obviously, different ways of doing things, and I've done an entire episode on them that is actually pretty interesting. I'm not just saying that because it's my own episode. I think the lore is interesting. Hopefully I presented it well, but regardless, you go to this pirate faction, which you will have engaged with at certain points within the game, and they offer the idea of you being able to summon the floating hangman, the Fonferrus, the Iron Strength, and use the special ability that ship has to part storms away from it as a way to sail safely through Andra's Mortar. It's a good idea, one that would work in theory, because that is one of the legends of the Fonferrus, is that it has a shroud of fog and mist that covers it, but that it also can part away any storms that were around it at the time. And so theoretically, you should be able to sail this right through Andra's Mortar. The only problem is how do you get it? Because not only is there only the one in the entirety of Deadfire Archipelago, and you can't just, pull up a GPS to find where it's pinging from, you also have to find a way to actually get it. Because it's being pirated by the undead, and a rather powerful undead at that. However, thankfully, whoever's in charge of the Pirate Confederacy at the time has an idea on what you can do. If you are able to get the sword from Aesir the Bereithian, from underneath the Berith Temple in Neketaka, in a location called the Hanging Sepulchres, you're able to find the Death Guard in these catacombs. And whether you have really good talking ability or you have really good combat ability, you can actually get the sword from this undead person, this Death Guard who has got this sword. And you're able to learn from the leader of the Pirate Confederacy that if you speak, I can't remember, some sort of incantation or an oath, or you speak something on the sea to the sword, it essentially acts as a beacon that Lucia Riven, as a Darkoni Paladini and undead servant, will be able to see, almost like this lit up beacon within the world itself. And you're able to summon the Fonferrus as a result. So clearly this sword does have some level of power to it. I highly doubt you just speaking a bunch of words onto a sword is all that it takes. There is clearly some sort of innate essential fusion in this sword that is going on. Essence being the stuff that souls are made of, and all the stuff that powers magic within this world. So the sword clearly matters, but Your goal is actually the Fonferrus. So you can do this as the main character in the game. You go and you fight or talk down a Ciri, you get the sword, and then you go out into sea, you activate the sword's innate power, and the Fonferrus arrives. Now again, you can engage in fight, or there are ways of diplomacy to actually acquire the Fonferrus itself, which you can then use in one of two ways. You can either go back to the Pirate Confederacy, say, I got the ship, now what? Or you can be like, screw those guys, I'm gonna do this myself, which is what I chose to do in the game, because every faction basically asks you to kill other people from other factions, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. So I just pissed everybody off and did none of that. But anyways, that's how you get the Fonferrus. And it's kind of odd to think about, at least for someone like me who dives into the lore a lot for this world. And I think about the fact that these two individuals that hail from 2,000 years ago at the fall of a grand society that has, created so much that you see in these world within these games, such as the Valian Republics, which is created the Valian Trading Company, which is now a worldwide economic superpower. You see the Pirate Confederation in the Deadfire Archipelago. They have a lot of influence over what's going on in this very important and ancient place within the world. You have the story of these two people that have transcended all those events, chasing this one sword, and it ends with you, this watcher from the Deerwood, who just needs to get to this one place, and you're using their story as a means to get there. And it's so easy to gloss over. It's, I think, very easy to get focused on the coolness of it, if that makes sense. I fought an undead guard underneath the ancient temple of Berith in the city of Nekataka. I grabbed the powerful sword and rode off into the sea. Well, I guess you don't ride off, you sail off into the sea. What are you? Sail off into the sea. I spoke the ancient incantation and wrestled with Livia Rusian, the powerful undead captain of the Fonferrus, and claimed it for myself. Upon which I sailed through Andra's mortar and strode as the first person in a millennia or two upon the grounds of Ukaizu, that ancient and mythical city. It's really cool. It's really awesome. Don't get me wrong. It's so crazy. But, there's a whole bunch of story and context of stuff that's going on within the world up to those points. And it's really easy to miss. And I like that Obsidian does this. I like that they give people the opportunity, much like myself when I first played the game, to just get lost in the really cool things about it. To interact with this pirate faction that gave me a lot of themes and reminders of a set of movies that I really loved when I was a kid, but they had their own unique spin on it, so it still felt novel and original. And I love that there was this power struggle going on that I was the center of, and I was this power fantasy hero, or I guess rogue in my particular case. And I love all that. And I love how in a second playthrough, especially as I was developing this podcast and learning more and more about the world, realizing just how deep the lore goes, that there's this entire civilization of people that once existed, and there is a paladin order. It's the oldest paladin order in the world, and that when people become death guards, they're not just cool undead people for you to fight and poke in the face with your own sword. They are death guards for a reason. And that's kind of the connection to Avowed that I like to bring up, because the main antagonist of the game, antagonist primarily, you can technically align with her, Inquisitor Ludwine from Avowed, she is also a Death Guard. This is something that's revealed to you at a certain point within the game of Avowed. And even though, again, I love that Obsidian has done this, it's easy to gloss over what this indicates. And I've talked about this before on other episodes, how it turns out that Inquisitor Ludwine, which is a person you can actually meet in the Deadfire game. So this isn't a person that we've seen for the first time. If you've played Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, where all this Fonferrus and sword stuff takes place, you can actually interact with Ludwine there when she's alive. But at some point, she was slain in the Deadfire Archipelago, perhaps at your hand as the Watcher in that game, or perhaps by some other means that we don't really get a canon explanation. Regardless, she dies, but comes back to life, or more accurately, stays in this world as an undead form, is in the form of a death guard, to fulfill her role as an agent of Woodaka, her deity that she loves and worships in this world. And she continues her role as a leader or captain within the Steel Garrote Paladin Order, a different Paladin Order within the world from the Darkosi Paladini, and they are more focused on bringing justice and law to the uncivilized and those that they call oathbreakers, which are essentially people who lie and breach contracts. But she has also become a Death Guard, and it's really easy when you're playing this game to just kind of gloss over like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, like the main antagonist or, person that you can ally with, if you decide to go that route, she's a Death Guard. She's an undead person, and that's really cool. But it's interesting to think about as well of like, what caused her to come back? What is this thing that she campaigns for? And the interesting things that Obsidian does with Avowed that kind of reinforce this. For instance, in a lot of these games, and Obsidian has done this too, you're often able to like convince people to do one thing or another. Eventually with a high enough statistic or a savvy enough, selection of dialogue options, you can convince people to do almost anything. But with Ludwig, she is so dead set on the things that she is trying to accomplish. There is no swaying her. And you get this, feeling, this sensation of it very early in game when you interact with her, that like this woman, this person is dead set focused on what they are doing, and there is zero sway on it. And this is even represented in the music. When I did my interview with Venus Theory, the composer for the game of Avowed, he talked about how in the game he created multiple themes that, depending on the choices you make, change as you progress through the game. I don't know if a lot of you have noticed that or not. As you play Avowed, the theme songs for your character and other characters and places, they can actually change. Like the songs and music that's going on in the background, it will actually be different as the game progresses. But he pointed out that there is one person in the game whose theme song, whose music doesn't change from beginning to end no matter what, and that's Inquisitor Ludwig's. When you pair this with the idea that she is a Death Guard, someone who has stayed alive through the force of sheer will and determination and faith to continue her campaign, to continue the thing that she wants to do, it makes sense why her music never changes. And it's a detail that I love that Cameron included in the music that he composed for all this. And it's a detail that's super easy to gloss over in Avowed, just like the entire story of the Fonferrus and the sword and these two Death Guards in Deadfire. It's something you can easily gloss over, but when you stop and you look at the intent of the design, you realize like there's actually a lot going on beneath the surface. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. Just some really cool stuff from these two games, talking about Death Guards and this awesome Pirates of the Caribbean theme thing. Hopefully, I'm not mentioning that too much because I don't want to downplay the originality that Obsidian has put into this, but I like that there's very clear inspirations from not just those movies, because those movies are also inspired by other sources as well. But yeah, I appreciate it. Anyways, that's what I want to talk about today. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's close out today's episode.
Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
If you liked today's episode, please send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. If you didn't like today's episode, but you stuck through it for some reasons, please send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. Always love to have conversations about the show, about the game, or just what's going on in your gaming life. If you want to follow the show on X/Twitter, you can do so at World of Eora, and I mostly just post updates when episodes are out. Things have been hectic and busy lately, so I've been releasing episodes every 2 weeks, or I guess every other week, most often. I'm hoping to host a special episode of Avowedcast next week, so hopefully the scheduling for all that works out and everyone can make it for that, and then maybe I'll post something about that here. And lastly, if you want to support the show, you can do so in a couple of ways. One, you can go to ko-fi.com/worldofeora, and it should be within the notes for this podcast episode's description, and you can, toss $5 for a coffee in there or support the show in any way that you want to in that regard. I want to point out, for anyone new to the show, I don't expect that of the listeners. If that's something that you don't want to do, don't feel like you have to do it, but there are those out there who get value and joy from supporting the things that they like to listen to. And if that's something that is of value to you, or this show has brought you any value over the last few years, then please consider supporting the show in that way. Another thing you can do, though, which would also help longevity-wise, is engaging with the platform that you're listening on, whether it is a rating or a review or leaving a comment, whatever you can do. I know Spotify and Apple both have services available to do this. This not only lets me know what you think and get some of that out there, but it also lets the algorithm of the platform that you're on let them know that there's engagement going on, and it helps exposure. It passes the show along to other people who listen to podcasts that you also listen to, and that would be a big help. But the most important thing you can do is just reach out. Send an email, worldofeora@gmail.com, and just touch base, reach out from one human to another, talk about how things are going, whether you like the show, what do you think about the games, interesting ideas, or even topic requests. That's everything for today. Normally, I would talk about what I've been playing for video games, but I have not been playing any video games. I'm going to dive into The Outer Worlds 2 pretty soon, but I've mostly just been, as a lot of you know, going deep into tabletop role-playing. I have, this last couple of weeks, really dove into the games of Mouse Ritter, Cairn, Mothership, and Grok, because they were all games that my table are interested in trying for one-shots, just to get familiar with the rules and prepare something for my table for a one-shot. There's a really fun game I found recently called Everyone is John, where all the players are acting like a voice in this one person's head, and they vie for control of this person named John, and they try to accomplish certain tasks that are tiered by 3 categories, and if you perform those tasks, you essentially get points for accomplishing them, even if you do them more than once, and at the end of the game session, we see who has the most points and therefore wins the game. It's a really interesting idea and take on tabletop role-playing, and I'm looking forward to trying that on a one-shot sometime in the future. But yeah, mostly been looking at any of those games, but I've also dove into a whole bunch of other ones. I have got Morkborg, as well as a lot of other hacks, Into the Odd, which has really inspired a lot of these games that I'm looking into. I did purchase the Daggerheart core set as a way to support that, because it was a game that I actually really like the design for, and I was a fan of Critical Role a long time ago, and so it's just nice to kind of support that and get decent quality product as well in the meantime. So that's kind of where my head's been focused at, and I've invested so much money into that lately that I kind of have to put the effort into it at this point. I will obviously be playing Outer Worlds 2. I could get it through Game Pass, but I'm actually going to pay for it because I really want to have that even if I unsubscribe from Game Pass. So looking forward to that. What about you? What have you been playing? Are there any tabletop games or video games that you've been into lately? Do you have any questions about it? You want to just have someone else to talk to about these things? Send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. Otherwise, that's everything for today's episode. Thanks everyone for listening to me here sit and talk about undead pirates and ancient powerful swords and civilizations, as well as undead death guards and the like. I hope you enjoyed it. And that's everything for today. I've been your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.